Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are continuing our season preview videos. So we're taking a look up in Newark, New Jersey at the New Jersey Devils. So last season was a really good year for the Devils. They're kind of looking to follow that up with another playoff run, and not only did they make the playoffs last year, they definitely went pretty far. They did a lot better than a lot of people gave them credit, and I think they're going to kind of build on that going into this season. So, looking at some of the changes to the New Jersey Devils, they didn't lose a ton of pieces or really any of like a significant magnitude. Yegor Sharangovich goes to the Calgary Flames in a trade, which we'll talk about what came in later in the video. Also, Miles Wood leaves for Colorado. Wasn't a huge loss for them by any means, but he was a valuable piece in the bottom six. I know a lot of Devils fans weren't a fan of him by the end of his time there, but Miles Wood is now in Colorado. Damon Severson also out the door. That one was definitely the way I thought of Damon Severson 2 years ago compared to right now are totally different. The depth just got better in New Jersey, and this defense is a lot better than it was when Damon Severson was kind of one of the top guys there. So, unfortunately, he's trying to find his career again. He will no longer be with the New Jersey Devils. I believe he went to Columbus. So, but that's okay because some of the additions that they made, it's not really going to look too bad that he's no longer in New Jersey. And that's kind of what we're going to get to next, which is some of the changes. Some of the guys that came in to the New Jersey Devils organization this summer. Tyler Toffoli, a part of that Yegor Sharangovich trade going the other way to Calgary. I really like that move for the New Jersey Devils. I think they got a really nice package. It really did not cost them all that much compared to what Calgary paid for Toffoli not all that long ago in order to acquire him. So the Devils did pretty well in this deal. That was definitely a big move there by Tom Fitzgerald and the Devils trying to add some more scoring depth to this team. Chris Tierney comes in. He's been bouncing around the league a little bit. He spent some time in San Jose, spent some time in Ottawa. So now he's looking for another opportunity here in New Jersey. Just a decent bottom six center that can jump in if you need depth. Brendan Miller. I believe this is, who is this? Colin Miller. Yeah, so Colin Miller, they need help on the right side. So I like the idea of bringing in a guy like Colin Miller. He's 30 years old. He spent the last couple years bouncing around. He was with Boston, which obviously he was most famous for, but then he went to Vegas for a couple years, went to Buffalo, and spent last season with the Dallas Stars, where he actually played pretty well in 79 games, picking up 20 points. So again, just another depth defenseman on the right side for the Devils. Another guy to look at is Brendan Smith. So Brendan Smith and Colin Miller, you're bringing in some of those guys in their 30s as defensive depth. And what's nice about Brendan Smith, obviously he's not too... this isn't a huge culture shock for Brendan Smith coming over from the New York Rangers, where he spent a couple of years with the Rangers. So just going over the Hudson River into New Jersey isn't going to be a huge culture shock for him. He spent last season with Carolina, did have a bad season, but not in the sense of like point-wise. This is a defenseman that never really puts up a ton of points. It's just, can he stay healthy? Last season he played 60 games with the Devils. I didn't realize he played with the Devils last year. Wow. So anyway, Brendan Smith is back with New Jersey. Now, what's interesting about this team is some of the younger players, because you look at the New Jersey Devils roster and you think, well, where are they going to put any depth on this team? Hold my beer. Looking at this team, you've got a guy like Simon Nemec, who is expected to potentially get on this roster at some point this season. So he might not start this season with the Devils. Again, considering some of those guys like Brendan Smith and Colin Miller being there, specifically Colin Miller, because he is a right-shot defenseman. That was kind of going to be Simon Nemec's spot, but now that we see that addition come in, this probably means he's going to spend most of the season in the American Hockey League with Utica. He played 65 games with Utica last season. Probably going to be a little bit more of an even split between the Devils and Utica this season. Hoping to get between 20 to 40 games, if we're being optimistic, maybe even more than that. He is still a very young defenseman, though. He's only 19 years old, so the Devils are definitely going to be careful in terms of letting this player develop and making sure he's really ready for the pro game. And I think that the Devils will be doing that here. Another one to watch here is Nico Daws. Now, Nico Daws is only 22 years old. The German goaltender didn't play with the Devils at all last season. He spent all of last season with the Utica Comets. His trajectory has definitely fallen off a little bit, which is definitely sad to hear. But his numbers were okay last season with Utica. He played 33 games, so hopefully we'll see him at some point this season. But that is one of those goalies of the future there in New Jersey, and it really hasn't been panning out. So hopefully things work out for him. They did pick up Erik Källgren, who was with the Maple Leafs last season. We all remember Källgren in the playoffs and toward the end of the season down the stretch with the Leafs. So they also have Källgren. But in between the pipes, it's going to expect to be Akira Schmid and Vitek Vanacek. So Vanacek, we know the story with him. He's got to stay healthy. That's been one of the big things. Staying healthy and being a consistent goaltender. That's really what the Devils need here. They don't need some elite Vezina-winning goaltender like Marty Brodeur. They don't need that with this team. They just need a goalie that can consistently just put an average level of goaltending out there. The Devils will have an opportunity to win a lot of games this season. And that's kind of where it leads us to our next point, which is our breakout player this season. Now, looking at the Devils roster, there's definitely a bunch of names you could look at. You're looking at we saw Dawson Mercer's breakout season last year. We saw Jack Hughes really come onto the scene the last 2 years. On the blue line, we've seen the emergence of guys like Jonas Siegenthaler and Dougie Hamilton. This season, I think on the back end, definitely watch for Luke Hughes. We saw him a little bit last year. We're definitely going to see more of him. He's expected to be a second-pairing defenseman alongside a guy like John Marino, which I think is going to be a really good pairing. The depth of this team has gotten a lot better, but some of these names still leave you wanting more, right? Like Luke Hughes, John Marino, Kevin Ball, and Brendan Smith is your second and third pair. There is a little bit to be said there. Is that a good enough defense to win the Metropolitan Division? I think it's good enough to make the playoffs, but is it enough to win this division? And that's going to be a real case that's going to be made probably in a 3-team race between the Devils, the Hurricanes, and the Rangers throughout this season. So keep an eye on Luke Hughes on the back end. But my breakout player is going to be a forward, and that is Alexander Holtz. Alexander Holtz is expected to be on the third line for the Devils to start next season, potentially playing alongside Andre Palat and Eric Howla. A lot of veteran leadership there. The depth of this team does create, if there is any opportunity where maybe somebody gets hurt in that top six, Alexander Holtz is probably the first guy that you jump in there. I'm really interested to see what happens with his career moving forward, because this is a guy that was expected to be a very good prospect for the New Jersey Devils. And, the Stockholm native has been kind of up and down in the NHL the last 2 years. Last year he picked up 4 points in 19 games, but in his Utica career last season, he was almost a point-per-game player, picking up 11 points in 14 games. So keep an eye on Alexander Holtz with the New Jersey Devils. As the former member of Djurgårdens of the SHL, a lot of players that come from there turn out to be pretty good pros, so hopefully that's the same for Alexander Holtz. And again, as everybody's saying, maybe is he a bust or things like that, he's a former 7th overall pick. He's only 21 years old. Give it this season, and maybe we have a little bit more to judge off of. So with that said, my predictions for the Devils this season in terms of the concept of what I think this season could look like, 45 to 50 wins for the Devils this season is definitely in the cards, anywhere between 105 to 110 points. I think they're going to be similar to where they were last year. Maybe a slight dip in terms of points. They had 115 points last season. Maybe see a little bit of a dip in that category. But nonetheless, the conversation still stays the same. The Devils are going to be a really good team. You look at the depth of this team, looking really good in terms of younger players that can jump into the lineup if need be, like a Simon Nemec, like a Santeri Hataka. We're going to see his name come up a little bit this season. Up front, you have some good young guys like Chase Stillman, Alexander Holtz. All of these are players that have been talked about for a little while, and we're just waiting to see if they can develop into NHL players either this season or even into the future, into next season. But, this is a really good Devils team. I like some of the moves they've made. There's a lot of veterans on this team, which I think is going to be important for some of the younger players, like the Hugheses and the Bratts and the Heishiers of the world. Seeing guys like Chris Tierney come in, it seems like a nothing burger, but those are the guys that you need when you need center depth. that's a guy that I think is a pretty good replacement to a guy like Jesper Boqvist. So in that sense, if you want to look at it in that sense, the Devils got better up front. The big question for this team is that goaltending. If we could see really good Akira Schmid first round against the Devils, against the Rangers, Akira Schmid, this team's going to be cooking alongside Vanacek and what he did at points during the regular season. This Devils team is going to be a legit contender. And considering his save percentage last season, he had a .911 save percentage in 52 games. He needs to continue to have seasons like that. And if he does, the Devils will find themselves exactly where they want to be, which is back in the playoffs and competing for the top of that Metropolitan Division. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section down below. What do you think of the New Jersey Devils? Do you think they're a playoff team? Do you think they win the Metro? I think that's the bigger conversation at this point. I think a lot of people are sold on the idea this is indeed a playoff team. It's just how far will they go? Shout out to Captain Mofongo, our big Devils fan here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching these videos. And thank you to all you guys for watching these videos as we're kind of getting to the New York teams now. We're getting pretty far along in this season series, so definitely stay tuned for the rest of the videos as we'll be finishing it up here the rest of this month going into September. And before you know it, we're going to be going into training camp, going into the preseason, and puck drop for opening night of that Penguins-Blackhawks Game 1 in the next couple of weeks. Guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.